Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by Kevin McCluskey and Laura Bradburn. By the way, Ange isn't the only one who can pull out a surprise in the lineup. Laura, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Fine. Good to see you. Yeah, I decided I've had enough of the rampant abuse about my taste in music in the group chat, so I thought I'd better come back and put you in your place, but there you go.
That's fair enough. We did. You did get a mention the other day when we were talking about the top 10 from, I think it was the year of birth of the striker O, and it was.
Yes.
I'm not going to say cheesy, but there was a bit of Westlife in there. There was a bit of Gabriel. There was, kind of the music that I would expect you if you had a quid and there was a jukebox. You might select a few of the tunes, Laura.
Yeah, I would say if anybody wants a rough overview of my taste in music, think primary 7 school disco in the late 90s and you've pretty much nailed it.
Superb. Top 10 on the day that O was born. O doesn't make the lineup today, but he is in the squad. And Kevin, I've got to say thank you to Ange Postecoglou for giving us a few talking points for today's game.
Aye, exactly. He does this every now and again, doesn't he? Just throws in a wee curveball because I think he knows we might need something to talk about for half an hour before a game. So he's definitely done it today.
He has. And by the way, we'll run through the team. I'm going to bring up the team lineup. I'm pretty sure just about everybody, if not everybody, has seen the lineup. And here it is. Hart, Johnson, Kobayashi, Starfelt, Taylor, McGregor, Iwata, O'Reilly, Maeda, Haksabanovic and Kyogo. On the bench, Bain, Moy, Turnbull, O, the aforementioned, Bernabe, Summers, Ralston, Welsh and Vata. We're going to be talking all about that. Some, I'm thinking, forced changes. Others, for example, Moy on the bench. We'll start off with that one. Laura, we spoke about it. It was the tagline on Friday. Should Iwata come in for Moy? I think that the lion's share of the comments we got said, no, stick with Moy. It's one bad game. He wasn't sharp enough. Get him up to match sharpness. Don't drop him. Ange has decided to bench him and Iwata comes in. What's your thoughts on that change, first of all?
I think, to be absolutely honest, I would tend to agree with people most of the time about he's had one bad game, don't drop him for that reason, but he was so particularly bad in that game that it almost looked like maybe he's I don't know if he's carrying an injury or if he's fatigued or something like that. And he has been so fantastic since the World Cup and has featured so heavily since the World Cup that I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I don't see any problem with dropping him today, especially when you've got somebody of the quality of Iwata coming in. And I think with the games still going, is coming thick and fast the way they are and trying to tie things up as quickly as possible the way we want, I don't see a problem with swapping people about and just making sure we've got the strongest 11 on the pitch that we can have. I don't think you could have said Moy being on the pitch today would have constituted our strongest 11 based on the performance in the last match. So I don't personally have an issue with it. I'm just delighted as well to see a bit more of Iwata because I've liked everything that I've seen of him so far.
Yeah, I have, and we've not seen a great deal of Kobayashi, who makes it into the starting lineup, Kevin, so we'll be talking about him as well. But Iwata was very impressive against Rangers, and I know this was like kind of broad strokes, but I think that when we made that change, Moy off, Iwata on, we definitely seen a different dynamic in the engine room in the midfield. Obviously, we got our noses ahead almost immediately. We then extended that lead. It was only when we changed the shape a wee bit that Rangers got back into the game. But I think Iwata has, like Laura says, he's shown a composure. He's cool. He's calm. He's got a really good range of pass. And people maybe talk about him slowing the game down or lacking a bit of pace. I think he looks like a very shrewd signing. Obviously, the MVP last year in Japanese football. We've probably not even seen the best of him yet.
Yeah, exactly. Last week, I think we spoke about it full time last week. I think he was the man that changed the game for us, and he didn't like have a direct hand in either of the goals after he came on, but he just, as you say, changed the dynamic of the midfield and helped us win it. Moy he was just off the boil last week. You could tell it was probably a game too soon for him in his recovery from injury. And he was totally off the pace. Iwata came in and, I think we've spoken about him after every cameo appearance that he's made so far this season. He looks a player. You know, he's a guy who's really comfortable in the ball. He demands the ball every time. He doesn't hide. He's not one of those guys, I think we've said, he doesn't posture for anything. He actively wants the ball. I don't think he slows the game down when he gets it at all. I think he just makes the right pass. And it's maybe not always a forward pass, but it's the right pass. It's a clever pass. It's the one that keeps possession. So, yeah, he was a huge player for us last week. In terms of playing him today, I was actually on the side of let's give Moy another chance, largely because we know what he can do. He's such a good player when he's on form. And I think he's a little bit more progressive and attack-minded in the way that he plays than Iwata. But there's absolutely no issues in playing him. You know, he's shown himself, as I said, to be a really talented player, MVP in Japan last season. We haven't seen the best of him, but we're all really impressed by what we've seen so far. So if he can come in today and be the 6 and be the base, and it does allow Callum to push forward a wee bit more, then that frees him up. That gives him that license to be more creative. And, you know, and that's a strong midfield that we've got, especially with O'Reilly and alongside them all as well. So, yeah, we're in that position that we've spoken about before where it almost doesn't matter which one of them plays. You know you've got a quality player coming into the team, and you know that there's a quality player on the bench ready to come in if someone's underperforming on the game.
No, for sure. And we'll talk about O'Reilly as well. Another player that came in for a wee bit of stick, I think, moving into the Rangers game. Quite a few of the comments we were seeing coming through were that he should maybe miss out. He comes into the game and he plays a part in all 3 goals. So I think he's deserving of his jersey today. Mark, good to see you on the chat. You're chatting on YouTube. Are the changes due to injury or just Ange going with rotation? That's a good question because, as I said at the top of the show here, Ange has given us plenty to discuss. When he's asked about injuries, he didn't mention anything about Carter Vickers or indeed Jota, who both drop out from the starting lineup against Rangers. We knew, of course, that Hatate was injured and he hasn't made it. I think Ange had said something about him being ready in about a week, so we would probably expect him to come back for the Motherwell game. But there is a suggestion that, you know, Carter Vickers may well be nursing an injury, so we're probably managing that like we did with Greg Taylor. So where you get an opportunity maybe for him to drop out, you'll do it. And obviously, as Kevin says, we've got the players in reserve that can step in. Otherwise, Ange wouldn't have brought them to the club. Ange is smart, says Joe Hamilton. Resting key players, going all in for the treble. Good morning, troops. Good morning to you as well. You and Boy Martin, good to see you in the chat. Hail, hail, troops. Good chance today for some players to shine and push for a regular starting place. But 3 points is all that matters today. I agree with that. Andrew Galea, that lineup will get the job done. Going back to your point, Kevin, you know, the secondary choices, if you can call them that, are good enough. And that is what Andrew is saying here. I'd love to see O'Reilly play as a 6, so he disagrees a wee bit with that. Push Iwata and Kilmarnock on, go Kobayashi. I mean, for me, it's Iwata as the 6, Laura, Kilmarnock as the 8, O'Reilly as the 10. That's the way I would line it up.
Yeah, I don't see any opposition to that, and the good thing that does is maybe free Kilmarnock up a little bit for moving forward and playing a bit more of an advanced role, which, to be honest, is as accomplished as he is in the defensive midfield role and has been an absolute stalwart there for us for a long time. I really do like to see him in that more forward-facing role, because I think he brings so much to the attack from that point of view. On that note, I just wanted to say I was actually at the Scotland-Cyprus game a few weeks ago, and I couldn't believe what I was watching in terms of the standard of players in that Scotland team, how far ahead Callum McGregor was. I mean, he was an outstanding... and that was on a day that we played particularly well, but just, you know, I don't need to tell anybody watching this show that he's, you know, light years ahead of somebody like Ryan Jack, but I mean, he is. And, you know, having him in any position in that midfield is a great thing to do, but I do prefer him in that attacking role, and I think Iwata. I don't want to say that he's better than Callum McGregor, but I think he's more suited to that defensive midfield role than McGregor is. I think McGregor's such an accomplished footballer that he can do a job there. but I think I prefer to see him further forward, and Iwata, who's a bit more of a specialist in that role, is definitely my preferred option. And just while I'm on the point as well, the other one, I know we'll talk about the defence in a minute, but as much as I'm concerned about Carter Vickers and the potential injury they're talking about there, I'm really pleased to see Kobayashi in, because again, I think he's a player I've seen do very little wrong, and I think he probably deserved a few more opportunities than he's got. And it's a shame that this has had to be the way that it's been brought about, but I'm pleased to see him in there getting a start. Hopefully he can get 90 minutes under his belt, and this is the start of something for him going forward.
Yes, I think there's a couple of discussion points that come with Kobayashi starting. One of them will be more of an onus on Starfelt to be the leader, if you like, in defence. And I think we've seen against Rangers when Carter Vickers was struggling. I mean, we spoke about that, Kevin, after the game. It wasn't his best game against Rangers, far from it. Starfelt then almost picked up the mantle and said, right, I'll take this one, kind of thing, and I'll lead from the back. But also Starfelt's playing in his preferred position, which is on the right-hand side of the two central defenders. Kobayashi, 22 years of age. This is his third start, Kevin. We've not seen much from him, but as Laura quite rightly says, what we have seen, he's looked very, very good. So, it's one of these games, Killie away, on a pitch that I don't think we like. Let's go out and see what you've got. And but the extra dynamic for me is Starfelt. You're the leader. You've just got to take this and run with it, because sometimes I think there's a tendency on here for us to talk about Carter Vickers being the main one, with Starfelt almost being his kind of sidekick. And that's flipped today, isn't it? Because Starfelt's the guy with all the experience here.
Yeah, and last week, Starfelt really stepped up to the plate, as you mentioned there. Carter Vickers just, again, like Moy, had a rare off day, and he's chosen it to be in potentially like the biggest game of the season up to that point. And normally, one, you don't expect it, and two, you have a bit of the fear kicks in when somebody like Carter Vickers isn't playing well, rather. And I think that was actually a lot down to getting that early yellow card. So it was booked after 7 or 8 minutes for the tackle on Morelos, which is debatable whether it was a yellow, but that's a different debate. I think that affected him. It took away part of that aggressive nature of his game. To say you get that little worry coming in, and Starfelt just picked it up. And I think that's Starfelt's key strength, is that he's a defender first and foremost. So when he has to lead and do the defensive side of the game, being aggressive, going in, winning the challenge, winning the header, that's when he steps up, and that's when you see the best of him. And today we'll see it even more, as you say, because he's on the right-hand side, where he's going to be a lot more comfortable in possession of the football. Next to him on the left, you've got Kobayashi, who's a natural left-footed player, and someone that, from the few appearances that we've seen so far, just looks to be a baller of a centre-back, really. Somebody that's so comfortable in the ball that'll help us, pass out from the back, which is how Ange wants us to play. So, and I think this is the kind of game that's probably perfect for him to come in, because Kilmarnock will sit back and play deep. They won't really try and attack and bring the game to us. So he's going to have time to settle himself into the game, you would imagine. He'll have time on the ball. He'll have time to play his game. Kobayashi, this is. So it's obviously a blow to not have Carter Vickers, but then you've got to look at the positives and go, this is a big chance for Kobayashi. Next season's going to be massive for him, and you think he'll get more games next season. So this is a chance for him to lay down a marker and say, I'm a first-team ready player.
Yeah, definitely. And we've spoken about Kobayashi, Iwata, Haksabanovic. We want to see more of them. We think they're going to play a big part in the second half of the season. So when they get put into the starting lineup, we can't sit here and say, I'm a bit worried about the changes, because we've been talking about it for the last few weeks. Aero250, good to see you on the YouTube. Morning, girls and boys. Chance for a few to shine and give Ange more headaches with selection 3-1. That's exactly what we're talking about, because we have spoken about that group of players who haven't played much football. Haksabanovic probably more than the rest of them, and we'll get to him, but now's the chance. Interesting enough, Mark also points out that Klinsmann is at Rugby Park today, on the subs though. It's always interesting sometimes in Scottish football where there's interesting moments in Scottish football where, for example, Wraith Rovers take the lead against Bayern Munich in Europe. I think Klinsmann might have played in that game, actually. Or Celtic.
Ronaldinho nearly signed for St Mirren, I think, as well.
Exactly, that type of thing. That, Ronaldinho almost signed for St Mirren. Johan Cruyff visiting Boghead. Aye, for Dumbarton. And today, we've got Jurgen Klinsmann at Rugby Park. And, I mean, the thing with Klinsmann is... at that time when he came to English football, I was a massive fan of English football. Everything about it, the glitz and the glamour, I got caught up in all of that. Used to watch all the games live, knew every player from every single team. And Klinsmann was kind of part of the memories for me, Laura, and he scores the goal and he does the kind of parody. So he does the dive for the celebration and all that kind of stuff. Everything seemed better in English football for me back then. Big baggy kits, loud designs, massive talented players coming into the game. But, I've kind of fallen out of love with it. I think I've spoken about that time and time again, but I used to love Klinsmann as a player.
Yeah, I think I was of the age and stage where you were trying to emulate celebrations when you were scoring goals, and there was no more iconic celebration than the Klinsmann dive. It was only as I got older that I got the gist of exactly why he started doing it, to kind of point and laugh at all the folk who called him a diver. And I did love doing it. Of course, my mum didn't love washing my kits when I came in after doing it, but thankfully for her, I didn't score too many goals. So, listen, there was a rough and readiness to the Premier League back in the 90s, and it was one of the reasons that I kind of loved watching it back then as well. And I always remember, I hate to say it on a Celtic podcast, I know, but with the recent passing of Gianluca Vialli, the team I always loved was that early Chelsea team. The one that came in with like Petrescu, Zola, Vialli, Mark Hughes towards the end of his career.
Don't forget Mark Hughes.
Yeah, it was unreal.
I was going
to say what's happening with Mark Hughes these days. Apparently, your campaigning for him, or supposed campaigning for him, wasn't very successful, and he's now at Bradford City.
He's actually pushing for promotion, it's got to be said, for Bradford City. Good result yesterday for him and for Bruni. I do keep an eye on several ex-players and those with a link to, as you say, various stories, etc., on a Celtic state of mind. My moving on from Klinsmann, my best memory of him was when Bayern Munich came to Celtic Park for the Peter Grant testimonial. And some wee guy, I'd love to find it. I always want to find out who these wee guys are, but some wee guy invaded the pitch and ran right up to him and just shook him by the hand before he was quickly whisked. He was probably about 12-year-old at the time. So if you're watching, give us a shout out.
That is a very well-mannered pitch invasion, I have to say.
It was. He just ran up and just shook his hand, and I think him and Matthias were kind of laughing. But there's a picture of Klinsmann with the hoops on after the game, because obviously, the testimonials and all that kind of stuff, that you always get a chance to see somebody like Cantona wearing the green and white hoops. One final point about the midfield before we go elsewhere is the performance of O'Reilly. I mean, listen, we do this all the time with McGregor. McGregor's the rock. We know he's going to be there. It will be interesting to see him in a more advanced kind of position today. But O'Reilly was coming in for a bit of stick, Laura, leading into that Rangers game. And, we were kind of the view, keep him in because he needs to play through it. And then for me, he was one of the star men again. He wasn't the man of the match, but he was one of the star men against Rangers, in my opinion. And hopefully he can kick on from that performance, Laura.
Yeah, I've kind of learned a little bit about Matt O'Reilly's playing history and his injury history in the last few months that have actually made me reevaluate a little bit of what I think about his form in the last few months. I mean, if you listen to Peter Grant talk about him, especially he's mentioned it a few times when he's been doing commentary on Celtic TV and when he's done various speaking engagements and stuff like that, people forget the link between Matt O'Reilly and Peter Grant, obviously, that he coached him as a young guy at Fulham. And Peter Grant was quite open about the fact that Matt O'Reilly essentially nearly never had a football career. He had horrendous back problems that nearly forced him out the game. And as much as I want to believe that you can overcome those things and have a fully fledged footballing career that's not affected by it, I don't think you can, depending on the severity of those injuries, I don't think you can go your entire career at the intensity that they're playing at, with the frequency they're playing games at, and not feel occasional flare-ups of that injury or easily tweak it or things like that. So that's always running in my mind about evaluating Matt O'Reilly and his form, because I think perhaps that's a contributing factor. But when he's on form and when he's fully fit, I still think he's one of the most talented players we've got at the club. I think he's got a natural ability with passing. I would like to see him chip in with a few more goals than he does. I know he did last season, but he hasn't so much this season. But I mean, he's still one of my absolute favourites, but I'd be a hypocrite if I turned around and said that I want to see him in, having just said that Moyes' form in the Rangers game should see him out. I still think we should go on form, and if Matt O'Reilly's form is meeting the requirements to be in the starting lineup, he should absolutely be there, but if it's not, he shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with your point there about him being one of the most talented, because when it comes to game-changing moments, he's there or thereabouts. And I keep saying that about David Turnbull as well, Kevin, when people are talking about the future of David Turnbull. He's on the bench today, of course. Not every player has that in their canon to change a game the way that Turnbull can, the way that O'Reilly can. And you've just got to look at I think he's still at the top of the table of assists for Celtic this season as well, Kevin. I mean, the impact that he makes, the one disappointment for me in his game this season has been his lack of goals. He looked last time round that he was going to be one of these goal-scoring midfielders. He hasn't really done it this season, goal-wise, but I'm in full agreement with Laura. And again, you do take into consideration, maybe by the 65th, 70th minute, where he does tend to fade a bit, maybe the back issues are flaring up by that point. You've just got to take this into consideration. And yeah, Peter Grant does like reminding us that he was his coach back in the day as well, Kev.
Aye, he certainly doesn't. He mentions it every time he mentions Matt O'Reilly. But aye, for me,
we love Granty, by the way. We're just obviously having a wee dig.
Absolutely do. So some of my fondest memories of watching Celtic as a young boy probably include Peter Grant and that tackle in the '95 Cup final on, was it Alan Lawrence or something like that, in the last minute. Yeah. He slides in, wins the ball, wins us the cup. Really, aye. Granty was a great player. But yeah. Matt O'Reilly, Matt O'Reilly is a special player, I think. When he's on form, he just does things that no one else in the midfield does. He's got that eye for a pass. We talk about Callum McGregor all the time being a great passer of a ball, and I love McGregor in the six because I think he dictates the play from there, and he makes the passes, the playmaking passes, the ones that keep things moving and keep us ticking over. But I think if you want a killer pass, O'Reilly's the man, because he picks up the ball in those like half space, I think they call it these days. He gets in the right positions, and he's quick with the passing as well. He's got the vision, he's got the execution, and he's the one that picks out the runs that Kyogo makes that no one else picks out. Really,
yeah.
He's also got a great range of passing, because there's been a couple of games recently, just this season. You go back to Dundee United when we scored the 2 goals in the last couple of minutes. It's his long ball over the top. It's not an aimless pass. He's picked out the run of Abada and he's in behind. So he's got a really kind of good range of passing. He's a really key player for us when he's on form. But yeah, like Laura says, and it's the same with everyone in that kind of position. When you're off form, it becomes really noticeable because he is the assists king. And so an off form O'Reilly isn't providing an assist, and you miss that and you notice it. So yeah, I mean, you have to pick a team based on form. You've got to allow players a bit of leeway to play through it. And I'm really glad O'Reilly got the chance last week, because I thought he was a star player for us against Rangers. I thought he was really, really key to the victory. And I hope they can now kind of continue that form on for the rest of the season. And if he could just chip in with an odd goal here or there, then he comes back to being that complete midfielder. Because there was somebody in one of the comments saying that he'd probably prefer O'Reilly at the number 6. And that's something that he's added to his game this season. That toughness as well, and the ability to play in any position in the midfield now. And same as McGregor, and hopefully the same as Iwata, or at least he can do a 6 and an 8. So within that midfield today, you've got a lot of rotation that can be there, which then probably goes against my suggestion of playing Moy, because he can really only play that kind of 8-10 kind of role. Whereas I think now you've got real good rotation. And you'll need that today against a team like Kilmarnock that'll sit back and sit deep. We've got players that can just give them a lot of problems, a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, well, it's a good point you make there about Kilmarnock. Obviously, yesterday's results have meant that they've now plummeted. If you look at that bottom three, it's so tight. You couldn't get a Rizzler paper in between any of the three of them at the minute. And Kilmarnock have dropped below Dundee United, who jumped into third bottom yesterday. It's a real fight at the bottom of the table. So they'll be looking to try and get anything at all from today's game at Rugby Park. And, you know, the point you make there, Kevin, about play your on-form players. If you were to pick a midfield based on form, obviously with Hatate out injured, that's the midfield you pick based on last week's performances. Yep. You pick Iwata, O'Reilly and McGregor. Incidentally, when I was talking about those out injured, and we know we've also got Jamesy Forrest, Carter Vickers, Hatate, Jota, Abada. 4 big players, and they're all out at the moment. Let's move on to the rest of the defence before we look up top with Joe Hart, Johnson and Taylor. Taylor, of course, also managing an injury at the moment. Alistair Johnson, Laura, who was the man of the match last week against Rangers. But Joe Hart, again, you know, going back to that point we made about the 2 centre-halves and the fact that Starfelt has to step up a wee bit more as the leader today, Joe Hart's also got a responsibility to do that today, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Just before we go on to Joe Hart, Alistair Johnston is one of my favourite Celtic players at the moment. Absolutely love the kid. He's like totally invested himself and ingrained himself in the lifestyle, and you know, obviously gives 100% as well as having ability. And to bring up my famed Celtic Nutters 11, if Stefan Mahay's taking one of the wing back positions, I think Alistair Johnston might have a claim for the other one, because I think he's an absolute underrated nutter. So I'm quite enjoying seeing that side of his game as well. But as far as Joe Hart's concerned, listen, I don't need to tell anybody again how much he's changed my opinion of him as a Celtic goalkeeper. I didn't really want him when he came, and when he did come, he completely shored up that position between the sticks. The one thing that I think remains a weakness in his game is the thing that Pep Guardiola got rid of him at City for all those years ago. If you're wanting a goalkeeper who can play the ball out with his feet, Joe Hart is not the answer to that question, and that is where he plays himself into trouble a lot of the time. He's as good a shot stopper as you'll find. I would trust him to save penalties. I would trust him to I know Tavernier beat him with a free kick, but I would trust him in most cases to stand up to free kicks, and as a shot stopper he can't be denied. But when we're relying on the goalkeeper to almost essentially be the fifth player at the back or something like that in these tactics, I really find it difficult to find confidence in him, especially when also you've got Starfelt, who occasionally likes to pass the ball back to the goalkeeper without knowing exactly where the goalkeeper is, and Hart taking up positions that are here, there and everywhere. That's the only time that my heart is in my mouth as far as Joe Hart's concerned. As a shot stopping goalkeeper, you'll struggle to find better, but as a more modern goalkeeper being expected to do the things that Ange's wanting him to do, that's where my only concern is, really.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of discussion around where they were strengthening in the summer, and quite a few people, myself included, reckon goalkeeper is one of those positions. Personally, I would offload Conor Hazard and Scott Bain, and I'd bring in a new goalkeeper, and my 3 would be him, Siegrist and Joe Hart to fight it out for the jersey. Up top, Kevin McCluskey, final point, Maeda, Haxa and Kyogo. Kyogo's going for 30 today. If he gets them, it means Celtic have scored 100 league goals. Haksabanovic, we've been banging on about get him in the side. He's in the side, and I'm guessing Maeda will switch over to the right-hand side for him.
I'm not so sure. Maybe. Probably will. Aye, now that I think about it, Haksabanovic is more suited to the left or the centre. But yeah, I'm obviously disappointed that Jota's not there, because he's a huge player for us, and we've not even spoken about him being out yet. That's a big blow. But yeah, Haksabanovic is a player that we've spoken about for weeks, probably months now, as a player that we'd love to see getting a chance, because he looks such a naturally talented player. Very kind of direct on the ball, good quick feet. Another one with an eye for a pass, a good finish on him as well. So this is a big, big chance for him. And he doesn't have the pressure of knowing that Jota's on the bench to come on and replace him. So that maybe could ease him into the game a bit as well. So really looking forward to seeing him and seeing what he can do. Kyogo's hitting an average of 0.9 goals per 90. So there's a very good chance that he'll get at least one today. And if he can, and he can help us to get to the 100 league goals, that would just be something sensational. Something nice to talk about at halftime, maybe.
Yes, I hope so. So with the composure of Awata, the youth of Kobayashi, the flair of Haksabanovic, we welcome back Laura Bradburn, of course, who has all these qualities in abundance. Let's go and watch the first half. yeah, Peter the Pointer. Peter the Pointer. Absolutely. Let's go and join the action. Come back to us at half-time. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to Kevin McCluskey and Laura Bradford for joining me on a Celtic